Okay, so we are reading here Swami Chaitananda's book, Sri Sharada Devi and Her Divine Play. And were reading last week about this terrible, awful sickness that mother was suffering through at the time. And he's going to pick up tonight just talking about this, which I think would be an interesting conversation. He says the human condition constantly fluctuates between fortune and misfortune, and neither state is permanent. Holy Mother was unfortunate in her health. Hardly had she recovered from dysentery when she had an attack of malaria, accompanied by an enlargement of her spleen. So it's interesting how he says that, that this human condition, our life, there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs, for sure, just in the way things happen, fortune and misfortune. Moods happen constantly and quickly, it seems. But the saving grace, or at least the one that Sri Ramakrishna keeps mentioning to us, and is the fact that none of it is lasting, and that helps to relegate it to some extent. When you get into these spaces, to remember this isn't forever, because I know our mental space can seem like it's forever. We get into a particular mood or get a particular perspective, and it just seems like that's forever. When I talk about it, I usually, to me, it's like I was swimming in the Gulf of Mexico way back in 1984. I was out there swimming, and I was with I was a youth minister for a children's home there in San Benito, Texas, and I had an assistant, or a co camper, I guess, who was taking care of these kids with me for the summer. And we were out at the beach, and we decided we could see quite a ways off the shore this row of white caps, and we thought, oh wow, I bet there's a sandbar out there. Let's swim out there and see if it's shallow enough to stand on the sandbar out there. So we swam and swam and swam, and it was just like when Zebulon Pike found the Rockies. In his journal for a whole month, he keeps saying that it's only a 5-day journey away till he gets to Pikes Peak, but he just keeps approaching it and approaching it and approaching it. Never gets to, hardly ever, it takes a long time to get there. And so we were swimming in the similar way. Just we swam and swam and swam, and these white caps just seemed to be receding into the distance. And we were so determined that we got out there and we were swimming in deep sea, because there were waves on top of waves. So there were these big swells and the waves and these bowls. And when you were in one of the bowls, you couldn't see land anywhere, and you couldn't tell. You didn't know what direction to be swimming. But fortunately, not as fast as the waves, but certainly with regularity, the bowl would come and you'd suddenly be up on top of a swell, and then you could see the shore and see which way you needed to swim. But I remember that sense of panic, because when you're in one of those bowls and you're swimming with the fear of drowning because you've realized you've overswum yourself out into the ocean like an idiot, you're sitting there and you're swimming, and two things happen. One, you can't see over the edge, so you just don't know where you're at. And the second thing is that water is water. You can't tell that you're moving. And so you feel like you're swimming and swimming and not getting anywhere. And this sense of panic overcomes us. And I think in life, we get into these situations of life, these arrangements of circumstances that come upon us, and they can be very similar. We struggle and struggle and struggle and feel like we're getting nowhere, and we can't see where to go. It seems like our current conditions are it, and they're not going to change, and we're stuck. And in the midst of that, it's always good to remember that you have been at the peak, that you have been on the shore, that things have been different, things are changing, everything is going to be manageable. It's all fine, that it's finite. And so in this life, that is one of the comforts that we have, which wouldn't be much of a comfort, mind you, if it wasn't for the ultimate truth that we are that we are immortal, that we are ever free, that we are ever blissful, that we are wisdom itself. Those are the things that make this life survivable. knowing that on our way to that realization, to that opening, to that acceptance, really, that recognition of self, that the ups and downs, the challenges, they come and they go, and that ultimately they crash. They crash on the shore of the self. The self is unaffected by them. And so, by finding that space where we can stand and understand that the world is just a world of change and will always be that way, and we withdraw our need to control it, we withdraw our need to gather anything from it, we find within ourselves, within that absolute unchanging within, we find what we need. But we have to be trained to go there. And I think that these waves, these risings and fallings, and the constant change and instability and insecurity of the world of material nature are designed exactly for that. Every up and every down, every difficulty, every greatness is meant to move you inward, move you closer to that unchanging absolute, where your security is in fact secure, where your identity in fact is true, and where you find the infinite, that which you've always sought, that infinite love, that infinite grace, that infinite comfort, that infinite life, infinite fulfillment, all comes from there. And so, Mother, being the greats, you can see the greats often. I mean, look at any story of any of these great manifestations, these avatars, and certainly the suffering in their life matches the bliss of their life, but sometimes at seemingly a much greater intensity than what you and I might be going through. When you look at the crucifixion of Jesus, or of course Thakur did it in a more human, recognizable way with the cancer that took him out. But also in that, he demonstrated that it didn't define him, that the cancer belonged to the body and not to him, and he could override it at will, which he demonstrated. And so there's that knowing. And I find, when you remember that, when you think about that, when you understand that, that it becomes much easier to navigate, in a very small way, in a ridiculously small way, actually. Is this I was running not far from the monastery in San Francisco, the Lion Street stairs, and it's like 3 or 4 blocks of stairs on the side of a very steep San Francisco hill there. And I used to go over and climb those for my exercise. And I hated it. I hated it from the first step to the last step every time. But I did it. And I remember one day I was doing it, and I think I was on my third out of 5 rounds that I would do. And I was sweating. I was uncomfortable. I was tired. I was not in a good mood. I didn't want to do it at all. And I was really being overcome by it. And as I was coming up to cross Vallejo Street, which is the street that the monastery was on, I was sorely tempted to just quit and walk back to the monastery. But something occurred to me, something kind of interesting to me. I thought, what is this? I'm not this body. What does that mean to me? Can I use that right now? Can I use that information to work on this? And the idea of my body being a chariot and me just riding in a chariot became kind of the image that came strongest to mind. And I thought, what if I do the rest of this exercise as if I'm riding the body, as if I'm not aware of the pain in the legs and the beating of the heart and the sweating of everything and the mood and all that? What if that was all the horse? What if the horse was feeling all that? And I'm just sitting on the back, taking a ride. And so I practiced with that. And I was astonished at how well that worked, how absolutely well that worked. That everything seemed to fall into a much better place. And with quite a bit of extra rigor, I managed to finish that workout. And so these little truths, as though we just kind of read that whole sentence there as sort of like all of it has the same weight, that the human condition constantly fluctuates between fortune and misfortune. We're like, yeah, that's true. And neither state is permanent. We're like, yeah, that's true. But that last little segment there, that none of it is permanent, that's one of these things that they drop in that seems so ordinary, but is golden. is a real key, because what does that mean? It means that these conditions are never permanent. There's only one thing that's permanent, and that's the self. That's this love. That's this wisdom within. And so if you can manage to take that sentence and think about, God, that's interesting. How can I use that? How can I apply that to running up and down these stairs, to getting up and living this life? And this idea of, no, they're not permanent is not quite enough, but it points at that which is enough. And that is the fact that there is something permanent. And that's you as the observer, you as the watcher. Oh, but actually we found out in Jnana Yoga last week that that wasn't permanent either. Because once you come to one without a second, there's no observer. There's no witness, because there's nothing to witness. There's one without a second. So Holy Mother was unfortunate in her health. Hardly had she recovered from dysentery when she had an attack of malaria, accompanied by an enlargement of her spleen. At that time, villagers relied on local remedies when they were ill. In those remote villages of Bengal, modern medical facilities were not available, so poor villagers would seek divine help and apply folk remedies to cure their diseases. Holy Mother went with her mother to the Kayapat Badanganj Shiva temple. I'm sure I destroyed that, but anyway. 6 miles from Jairambati for a traditional treatment that was as bizarre as it was painful. The patient bathed and then was made to lie down on the temple floor. A piece of banana leaf was placed on his or her abdomen. 3 or 4 people held the patient's hands and feet tightly. Okay, that's not a good scenario. I only have that once in my life. It wasn't for a good reason. And then the patient's abdomen was branded with a burning branch from a plum tree. Oh my God, Ma. Holy Mother watched other patients undergoing this cruel treatment and heard their piteous cries. When her turn came, she would allow no one to touch her, but lay quietly down on the floor and was branded. Silently, she endured that excruciating pain, and her spleen gradually returned to normal. Oh my God. Oh my God. That she withdrew from everything around her. Where do you think that she went? She went to the absolute unchanging. She went inside, the same as Trigunatito when he withdrew from the body to put his mind in that same space. They go to the shrine. They go to that inner space within. And how boldly that she went, leaving everyone. The reason it's quite an emotional thing for me to read is back in 2008 when I broke my right leg, had a compound fracture. And the pain, fortunately, is just a symbol in my mind. I can't actually remember the pain, but I remember screaming to the point that the people that had come with me, one of them was a nurse, a registered nurse. They came with me to comfort me, and they were all holding my hands and, stroking my hair and such. By my third scream, finally, Beth, the registered nurse, she was the last one with me. She bent down and whispered in my ear. She says, "My heart is with you, but I can't endure this anymore. I'm going to go out." And I remember when everybody left, and I was just laying there on this metal, what do you call that? X-ray table. And the guy was trying to roll my leg back and forth to get different angles for pictures. And I was just blood-curdling scream. And I think about Mother here. Look at this. The amount of discipline, the amount of faith, the amount of, I don't even know what it's called, to be able to just completely know the shrine, know the self so vividly that in the midst of this excruciating distraction, this excruciating pull out from the inside, that the Mother was able to go inward like that and to calmly do what I know a grown man would not be able to do, and to withdraw from that pain and to calmly accept such a thing. First of all, not to go screaming and running out even before they burn the palm leaf into your stomach, but to actually go in knowing what's going to happen. Wow, we are not talking about a regular person. We're talking about something very profound and something that gives a great deal of hope, a great deal of inspired strength, actually. Sometimes we wonder why great souls endure so much suffering. Human life consists of happiness and misery, comedy and tragedy. When divine beings take human form, they must obey this law of Maya, because happiness and misery are inevitable. Avatars accept this reality when they take on a human life, but they are not affected by it. Rather, their minds dwell in their divine nature, beyond the pairs of opposites. Where is he pointing to? Where is this place within you beyond the pairs of opposites? It's outside of mind. It's mind alone that has created the sense of opposite for us, the plus and the minus. And so to be able to find the self that lies in the stillness outside of the definition of mind, the constant, quote, help, the constant help that mind is offering in its definition of us and trying to help us through the day, we've become dependent on it. And we go to the mind for all of our information about ourselves, how to react, what do we do, what are our plans, what do we want, how are we feeling, all of those things. And you see, by being interested in those things and by going to the mind for that information, we are doomed to this suffering that the Divine Mother is going through. And we're being taught very directly here that the way to deal with it is to step outside the world of opposites. One, by understanding that it passes. So the changing is unreal. That immediately indicates mind, active mind, that it is unreal. It does not define, it does not teach, it does not project. It is unreal. There's no substantiality there. You are the only substantiality within your body mind, this self. And that self is separate. That self is separate from this. So they are not affected by it. Rather, their minds dwell in their divine nature beyond the pairs of opposites. They take human birth to teach ordinary people. That's you and me. And that's what they're doing right now. Teaching you and me how to face difficulties, how to face suffering, how to maintain peace and harmony, and experience divine bliss by leading a God-centered life, right? By leading a God-centered life. And what does that mean? That means that you have discovered the pole that doesn't change with the rest. And you're holding on to that pole, that unchanging nature within. And you're circling around it, playing as much as you do, but you never take your hand off of that pole. And what is that? That's the constant remembrance of the presence. That's the practice of Brother Lawrence. That's the teachings of all the sages. So Brother John, all of these great saints, they always hold firmly to that center pole. This is why we do that. This is why we constantly repeat the name. This is why we're always trying to get ourselves to think of God, remember God, remember the divine. And unfortunately, for most of us, we place that as something outside of ourselves. I got to remember God. Oh, I got to remember, Mother. I got to remember something out here. But Mother isn't out there. I mean, she is out there, obviously, but she's also here, more intimate than your breath, closer than your neck, the sages say. And that you have to find that space within, and you have to live there. You have to watch the rest of your life from that place, because that place is what will teach you that this is unreal, that this cannot affect you, that your strength is inherent in you. It's not developed in you. It's inherent in you. It's your nature. All right. So when life gets difficult, go inward. When the pairs of opposites are hurling themselves at you and causing all kinds of uh, suffering, go inward, find the divine. Mother stands there, unchanging and absolute, within your very center in the shrine of the heart. Go there, hold on to her, and don't be washed away by the currents around you. That's a God-centered life. And from there comes compassion, grace, joy, bliss, all of those things. All right. Anyone have anything to say about that section or to ask?
It seems like that inward place is all pervading as well.
Yes.
Like it okay. It was just a thought.
Yeah, go on with it. Tell us more about it. That's
Well, like going inward, like you can't pinpoint that spot. I mean, you use awareness to draw yourself into that pinhole space, the end of the black hole, but it feels as though it's an all pervading place, that omniscient, omnipresent. It's that God space. So that point shows it's automatically detached from body mind. You can't contain that. You're not contained. You appear contained, but you're not really contained.
wonderful. Wonderful. Very worthwhile addition. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's one of the things that happens at Edge of Mind. The particular dissolves, right? The particular dissolves. There's no thought. Thought is what categorizes, right? And the ego is very interested in that categorization. And so the ego forms in the midst of that kind of energy. And when you step outside of it, you're no longer subject to that separation. You're no longer subject to that brokenness, those pieces. And you step out of the flow of time. So you become aware of your eternity. You become aware of your isness, which is, in mind, when you talk about eternity, we think a long time. But when you step out of mind and think of eternity, you just think of isness. There is no change in it. There's no movement in it, because time is just a rate of change. And outside of mind, there is no change. So there is no time. And so, yes, this space, this shrine within, is all encompassing. Exactly right. It's all encompassing. It's pervasive. It has its center is everywhere.
Excellent. All right, let's go on to the third visit. What's
Swami, I have a more particular question.
Yes.
So you left us in the middle of the ocean and you were fighting the swells.
Uh-huh.
So how did that end up? You made it to this side.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's got a very boring ending. Well, fortunately, I guess it's got a very boring ending. We ultimately made it back to the shore, but it wasn't. There were several moments in there where we were clinging on to each other, encouraging each other. We got to keep swimming. Are you all right? You're going to be able to make it. Do you need to rest? So there was some drama around it. And as I retell the story, I'll make sure there's more. But we made it to the shore, and ultimately that's a good point too, because ultimately, as dramatic as our lives are now, and as much suffering as we may or may not undergo, we'll get back to the shore. And when we tell our stories around the card table in heaven, we're all going to do a lot of eye rolling as we each try and make our own story a little bit more dramatic than the previous one. But we're going to make it, and that's the thing to hold on to. That's the thing that removes the power of the opposites. That's the thing that removes the power of the suffering. It isn't going to last forever. You will find your inner bliss. You will return to your true nature, and that everlasting bliss, that everlasting love, will become. I messed it up by using the word become. It is, in fact, the eternal non-experience. Yeah. So we made it. That's the bottom line. And Thakur says all of us will make it. It's just a matter of time. Those of us who are more distracted, we'll just dilly-dally a little bit more than the rest.
And, I always felt like that's why Mother made me a monk, because she knew that the last person in line is going to need to come in with somebody. So she she pointed at me and she's like, nobody will be behind that dude. So, all right, third visit to Dakshineshwar. In 1876, Holy Mother journeyed to Dakshineshwar via Telobelo with 2 villagers, Gosain Das and an unidentified woman. They arrived on the 17th of March. This time, Holy Mother stayed in the cottage at Shambhu Malik had built instead of at the Nahabat. Holy Mother later said to M's wife, Nikunja Devi, "My daughter, Shambhu Malik built that cottage for me, but I was reluctant to live there alone. One day I mentioned that to the master. He then said to Hriday, 'Hriday, you bring your wife.' Thus, Hriday's wife from his second marriage came to stay with the mother at Dakshineshwar. On the 22nd of May, 1876, Holy Mother observed the Savitri Vrata in Dakshineshwar." And the footnote here says, this Vrata, or vow, is observed by married women on the full moon day of the month of Jaishtha, mid-May to mid-June. On this day, it is believed that Princess Savitri brought back her husband, Satyavan, from the clutches of Yama, the god of death, through her devotion and her prayers. All right. In an article entitled Glimpses of Pages from an Account Book in Amritara Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Prabhananda supplied some new information regarding Holy Mother's cottage that is based on the Chatterjee family account book covering 2 years, 1283 BE, that's 1876 to 1877, and 1287 BE, 1880 or 81. He received the account book from Anil Gupta, a grandson of M, and Prabhananda wrote, Shambhu Malik leased a piece of land for 250 rupees to build a cottage for Holy Mother. Vishwanath Upadhyaya supplied the necessary timber for its construction. A thatched hut was built there. In the account book, we find that on the 3rd of May, 1876, worship and other rituals were performed there, and the priest was paid 4 annas. On the same day, a door was installed at the house at a cost of 2 annas and 2 paisa. Then, on the 12th of June, a wooden cot was bought for 3 rupees and 8 annas from someone named Ramteli. A maidservant named Kali's mother was also appointed at a monthly salary of 1 rupee to help Holy Mother with her household work and to stay with her. Lakshmi, Sri Ramakrishna's niece, lived in this cottage for a few days, and Hriday's second wife also came there to live with Holy Mother. Either Kali's mother or Gupi, a temple employee, did the marketing for them. Of course, Holy Mother did not live there long, but Hriday's wife continued to live in that cottage even after Holy Mother returned to the Nahabat. So the Nahabat is that small building for musicians, but it's probably, 15 yards over from Ramakrishna's room in the temple complex. So right there, very small place, as we've mentioned. And when you get there and go visit it, it will be smaller than you imagine it. It's a very tiny place. So Shambhu Malik and his wife were extremely devoted to the master and to Holy Mother. Shambhu's wife regarded the master as God. Whenever Holy Mother was at Dakshineshwar, she would invite Holy Mother to her home on Tuesdays, an auspicious day for mother worship, and worship her with 16 items. Very interesting in her lifetime that somebody, one of the women, recognized her and would worship her as God through a formal puja on Tuesdays. That's something. That's something. Holy Mother stayed in the new cottage close to Ramlal's house with Hriday's wife and a maid, but she did not live there for long. Soon after she moved there, the master was stricken with a severe attack of dysentery and could not go to the pine grove to answer the call of nature. Holy Mother later recalled, "Is blood dysentery an ordinary disease? During the rainy season, the master suffered from dysentery. A commode was made by making a hole in the center of a wooden box and putting an earthen pan below, and this was kept in the northern veranda. I used to clean it in the morning, and others did it in the afternoon. At that time, a woman came from Varanasi to nurse the master. One day she brought me from that cottage to the Nahabat and said, "Mother, the master is so sick, and you are living away from him." I replied, "What can I do? How can Hriday's wife live here alone? And moreover, Hriday is with the master." She said, "It does not matter. They will find a companion for her. It is not right for you to stay away from the master." I took her advice and came to the Nahabat to look after the master. When the master got well, that woman left and I never met her again. She really helped me a lot. I later inquired about her in Varanasi, but could not locate her. Strangers came to Dakshineshwar whenever the master needed them, and afterward they disappeared. This is one of those interesting things. All these people that did come to the master to teach him and train him at different periods in his sadhana. You know, it's even as a kid, I used to wonder about that. Like, is everybody else real? You know, like all these people that you see on the street, you know, as you pass by, it's like, are they all real? Like, how do we verify? How do I know that this isn't the only role they play in my life? That they just kind of appeared at this side of the street, walked past me, caused a couple of thoughts, and then their play is finished in my life. You know, so it's interesting that this same kind of scenarios sort of being played out here, that the master, you know, that God created people or brought people to him, however you want to view it, brought people to him as they were needed, as they were necessary in life. And you know, what's interesting is I don't doubt that this is totally untrue for us as well. You know, I think God loves us as much as anyone and is actively working as much in our life as he does in his manifested, well, what would you say, in the avatars. that the same love exists for us as for them, and you know, that actually their existence is an expression of that love for us. And so that in our lives, I don't think there's anything inaccurate about being a bit more mystical about the people that we meet and the things, the opportunities that arise, and the things that we learn from those people and from those opportunities and those experiences. That it's not a set of random things happening to us, but it's part of a divine plan built on a very deep and deeply rooted love for our betterment, which is why, you know, the scriptures would tell us that everything in your life is put there to work together for your good. And so you can hold on to that as well as that first sentence that we read, where the ups and downs come, you know, but that does not last. You can view there's a purpose to all those things. None of our suffering is for nothing. There's always a purpose to our suffering. And that purpose is always love, you know, always trying to teach us or pull us closer to our nature, to what we are. So when we lose a loved one, you know, when our body is terribly sick or broken, I remember thinking about that as I laid on that bed in the front room of the monastery with a broken leg, trying to comprehend the fact that my body was broken. Like, that had never happened before. I never had that idea of the body as such a material thing like that, you know, that like a dish, it can break. And I had a lot of time to think about it. I learned quite a bit from that experience. So you see, our suffering and the joys, but usually the suffering is more effective because it makes us think about it more. The joy we just take and enjoy, but the suffering, you know, we sit there and wonder. We sit there, oh my God, what's going on? Why is this like this? Is this ever going to end? Boom, boom, boom. So just know, as the master was, as God, the divine, was sending these people to the master to nurture him, to take care of him, to teach him, to bring him forward in his purpose, that's the same with our life. That Mother's paying at least that much attention to you, and that this day that you had was your day. And it's always good, you know, to do what the master suggests. At the end of the day, lay down and give an account of it. Lay down and think, what did I learn today? What did I see today? Am I closer to the divine than before? Does the day demonstrate that love is the most important thing in my life? Does the day demonstrate that God is my all in all, that I have nothing but that? To consider. And you don't have to make any big, statements about tomorrow or any great repentances about the day. Just being aware of your life at that level will do the trick. Just paying attention will do the trick. Because your nature is not just some nature of a puppy dog. Your nature is God herself, with all of the power, with all of the strength, and with all of the wisdom and knowledge. And so paying attention with that self will bring these things to their proper resolution. This woman from Varanasi not only encouraged Holy Mother to nurse the master, but also encouraged her to give up her shyness in front of the master. Yogan Ma later said, previously the mother had felt bashful and kept her veil on in front of the master. But that woman from Varanasi removed the mother's shyness. One night she escorted the mother to the master's room and removed the mother's veil in front of the master. Then the master began to talk about God to them, and they listened, spellbound. They were so absorbed in listening to him that they did not notice that the sunrise. Wow, so the whole night. That's exactly how it would be, though, isn't it? Can you imagine being taken to Thakur's room? It's just you and a friend, and he sits you down, and the veil comes off, which really is metaphorical, for just taking off your pretense. Sitting in the comfort of someone that loves you as you are, all the way down, removes any need to impress, any need to demonstrate, any need to complain. You can just sit there in that presence and to have that person talking about things that normally we just read about, but speaking of them from life, from experience, from knowing firsthand in the room, talking to God as they're talking to you. Who would notice the sunrise? You would just be there enthralled. Just what a wonderful gift that is for us even now. After serving the master for a few months, Holy Mother returned to Jairambati via Burdwan on the 8th of November with Hriday's brother Rajaram. Swami Prabhananda quoted from the account book of the Chatterjee family, 11 rupees were spent for traveling expenses for the two people. The expenses incurred on the journey included boat fare from Dakshineshwar to Howrah, 8 annas, train fare from Howrah to Burdwan, 4 rupees and 12 annas, fare for a bullock cart from Burdwan to Karmarpakor, 4 rupees, plus miscellaneous expenses on the road, including food, 1 rupee and 12 annas. It's just reading that through, it's kind of funny that they have these actual prices listed out. But it does bring back an interesting point. Remember, how much is that maid that was helping Holy Mother paid? She paid 1 rupee a month. And look at this journey. This is not a journey that a poor person could take. There was a lot of money spent when you consider that a salary could be just 1 rupee a month. Perhaps this was part of the play that Holy Mother had to go back and forth between Karmarpakar, Jairambati, and Dakshineshwar. She was dependent either on her husband or on her mother, and dependence always brings misery. That's an interesting statement. Dependence always brings misery. That's interesting. The only thing that comes to mind as I roll that around in there is this talk that I had with Swami Prabhupada about drugs way back when. At that point, who was it? Who's that guy? Greg, you know him. Who was, he wrote that book on world religions. Houston Smith. My team, all right. Houston Smith. Houston Smith had just written a book on drugs and the spiritual experience. And, I'd had those in my early days, had done my own experiences, experiments around that. And so I was talking to Swami Prabhupada. I said, "Is there anything to that? I know that even in Hinduism, there in the early days there was some usage of drugs in that." And I was curious about what he was going to say, and so I asked him. I said, "Is there anything valid?" And I was quite surprised because he said yes. He said yes. You can have divine experiences through the use of these substances. He said, which I was totally floored by that he would say that. I thought that at the time, but I didn't. I would never have said it out loud in front of him. But for him to say that, but then he followed it up with something that's apropos to this statement. Is he said, "But see, the ideal of Vedanta uh, is freedom." And he says, if you depend on something outside of yourself for your experience, then you are a slave. You have violated the principle of Vedanta. Vedanta wants you to be free, dependent on nothing, dependent on no one. And so the fact that Chaitanananda would say here, even in Mother's dependence on Ramakrishna as such, that there's misery in that. That dependence takes away your reliance on self, your freedom in there. And so that in this world we should not be dependent. That's indirectly what God is telling us when he says, "I am your only refuge." Right? Because if you take refuge in anything else, that means you're dependent on those other things. And if you're dependent on them, that means you believe in them. You believe in their reality. And if you believe in their reality and they prove to be unreal, you're going to suffer misery. Because the world changes constantly. I remember back when Germany's wall fell down and East and West Germany was united. And I was sitting there in geography class the next day, and I was looking at that. And I was really surprised because up until that point in my life, the map of the world had not changed. And I kind of assumed as a child that the map of the world was one of those things. It doesn't change. And to see it change in front of my eyes and then to go back to class like 2 weeks later and see a new map where Germany was now twice the size of what it was, and there's only one name, it was like, wow, God, even the map changes. What an incredible thing that is. And so any dependence that you have in your life is going to cause you pain. And Mother will make sure of that, not because she hates you. She'll make sure that you feel that suffering to betray to you the fact that you have willfully submitted yourself to slavery by being dependent on something outside of the divine presence within. Right? So this is quite a little sentence here. There's quite a bit indicated by it, that dependence always brings misery. After her father's death, her family in Jairambati was passing through hardship. Her uncle, Ishwar Chandra, was performing rituals for people in Calcutta, but could not make enough money to send back to the family in Jairambati. The mother's younger brother, Prasanna, learned to perform rituals and left for Calcutta to earn some money. Holy Mother did not get any financial help from her husband or from his family, as they were also poor. So whenever she had any difficulties, she took shelter with her mother at Jairambati. She helped her mother with cooking, cleaning, washing, and other housework. Shyama Sundari had a strong body, an indomitable willpower, and a steadfast faith in God, which is why Sri Sharada would be so at home there. Exactly. So yes, this is why Mother gives us Sangha. And you think, well, isn't that a dependence? Oh, yes, it is a dependence, but it's a dependence with Mother behind it. It's a dependence that has the qualities that Shyama Sundari has: a strong body, indomitable willpower, and a steadfast faith in God. So those dependences are offered by the divine, and they're meant to be railings. They're not something you carry with you all the time. They're railings. When you lose your balance, or you just need some stability or some strength or some encouragement, it's there. And so, as we look around at all of our pictures here, know that you are gifts to each other for this journey from the Divine Mother. and that your responsibility in that is to have an indomitable willpower and a steadfast faith in God, because we're holding on to each other for that. And so develop that in yourself and depend on that in each other and encourage that flame in each other. This is Sangha. This is the band of pilgrims that Mother has assigned to help you on this walk to your knowledge. The fourth visit, the encounter with the robber. Ramakrishna's mother, Chandramani, passed away at Dakshineshwar on the 13th of February, 1877. Now, this is a footnote here. When Chandramani was about to die, she was carried to the Bakul Tala Ghat for the Antarjali rite, which involves immersing the lower part of a dying person in water. According to the Leela Prasanga, the master asked his nephew Ramlal to perform the last rites as he was a monk and not allowed to perform such rites. In the account book of the Chatterjee family, there is a reference to gifts bestowed on the fourth day of Chandramani's death for Agradani, a rite which the Brahmin ceremonially receives the first gift in memory of the deceased person. Yeah. So submerging the body into the water, halfway into the water. I don't know exactly where that comes from, but it seems beautifully metaphoric about the return to the formless. You know, putting half the body in as a person's dying, there's still half in the world of form, you know, and then the other half in the world of the formless, returning to a more natural state. The master had tremendous love and respect for his mother. When she died, he cried aloud, saying, "Mother, mother." Hriday reprimanded him, saying, "Uncle, you are a monk, and now you're crying for your mother." The master replied, "You rascal, you keep quiet. I may have become a monk, but that does not mean I am a heartless beast." Holy Mother later told Nukunja Devi, "When my mother-in-law was dying, the master said, 'O Mother, blessed you are, you who carried me in your womb. Mother, you looked after me in this form, and henceforth, please do the same.'" Another day after his mother's passing away, he told me before lunch, "Please wait. Let me go to the Panchavati and cry for my mother." At that time of Chandramani's death, Holy Mother was in Jairamati. When she heard the news, she left for Dakshineshwar. On this occasion, she encountered a robber in the field of Telobelo. She was traveling on foot, accompanied by the master's niece Lakshmi and a nephew, Shivaram, as well as two other village women, Satyavama and Saukuni, who wanted to bathe in the holy Ganges River. During her journey, she hid her jewelry in the bundle of Lakshmi's puffed rice as a precaution against robbery. The master had taught Holy Mother, "Adjust yourself according to time, place, and person." Although Holy Mother lived behind a veil of modesty, if necessary, she could fearlessly cast off her habits and customs to deal appropriately with any situation. During this incident, she showed exceptional courage, intelligence, and self-control. Swami Sharadananda narrated the story, and I think we might. No, we'll do the story. But this is a beautiful thing right here. You see this detachment that Holy Mother had, even about familiar things, or her culture and her belief systems and her religious systems, that if necessary, she could fearlessly cast off her habits and customs to deal appropriately with the situation. You know, that's her showing us what detachment looks like. That yes, normally we accept the way that society works and the things that we have to do, you know, and to operate there. But that when necessary, our attachment should be matched by our detachment. And we should be able to let go of those things fearlessly, to approach the situation neutrally and perhaps in a new way, perhaps in a more helpful way. And so not to be attached, not to be predefined in the moment, but always be free and always be able to hear the voice, a new teaching, a new direction, a new insight. And don't try and force your ideas, opinions, worldviews, and whatnot on all situations equally. There are times for it and there are times for it not. And so have this kind of flexibility inside. Don't be disturbed, don't be disgruntled, or get all up in a tither when somebody puts the shrine knife on the wrong side of the plate. Don't be like me. I used to go into the table when they'd set the table, and the Indian boys would always just randomly throw forks, knives, and spoons wherever they landed on those things, it seemed. And I would go in for years, and I'd put the fork on the left, and I'd put the knife on the right, and I'd put the spoon next to the right, and I'd put the napkin underneath the fork and the knife, and I'd put the bowl in the top right corner, and the drinking glass in the top left corner. And I used to just drive me nuts when that wasn't carried through. And I, of course, tied it to much grander things, but it caused suffering. I have to say, it caused suffering. So be flexible. And just like Thakur, I'm not an uncaring beast. Yes, I'm a monk. Yes, I've renounced family, but I'm not an uncaring beast. It's the same story in Thakur's life as what we're reading here in Mother's life. It's like love is always the right response, and love looks many different ways depending on circumstance. And so be clear in your mind so that you know how love needs you to act in the moment appropriately and perfectly, and be fearless. So Swami Sharanananda narrates this story, and we'll read this, and then we might not make it all the way through. In those days, Holy Mother usually traveled from Jairambati and Karmarpakur to Dakshineshwar on foot because she had no money, or little of it, or for some other reason. People traveled from the Jairambati Karmarpakur area to Jahanabad or Ambag, and then crossed the 10-mile-long field near Telo and Pelo to reach Tarakeshwar, from where they had to traverse a similar field, Kaikala, to reach Baidyabati, and finally cross the Ganges by boat to Dakshineshwar. Those two vast fields were inhabited by highwaymen. Even now, people say that many travelers lose their lives at the robbers' hands in the morning or at noon and in the evening. Telo and Belo are two small villages situated almost side by side. In a field a couple of miles away from these villages is a temple with a fierce and dreadful form of Kali, known as the robbers' Kali of Telo Belu. People say that robbers worship this Kali before proceeding to rob and murder travelers. In those days, people traveled in groups to traverse those two fields in order to protect themselves from robbers. Once, Holy Mother was walking from Karmarpakur to Dakshineshwar with the daughter and younger person of Rameshwar and a few other men and women. After reaching Arambagh, her companions thought they had enough time to cross the field of Telo Belo before dusk, so they were unwilling to pass the night there. Although the Holy Mother was exhausted from the journey, she said nothing and walked on with the party. But they had scarcely walked 4 miles when she found she could not keep up with them and began to lag behind. They waited for her for a while and then asked her to walk faster and moved on. When they reached the middle of the field, they noticed that she was quite far behind and was walking slowly. They waited for her again, and when she caught up, they said, "If we walk this slowly, we shall not cross this field before 9 p.m., and we may be attacked by robbers." The Holy Mother knew that she had inconvenienced the others and caused them alarm, so she asked them not to wait for her. She said, "You go to the inn at Tarakeshwar and rest there. I shall meet you as soon as possible." Seeing the approach of sunset and taking her at her word, without further delay, they began to walk faster and were soon out of sight. This is why dependence causes misery. This is exactly why. You know, all of your mates will leave you. It's the way of it. It was the shocking lesson when I joined the monastery. You know, I used to throw these regular dinner parties, and there'd be 40, 45 people at those dinner parties, and I would count all of them my friends. I moved into the monastery. I was only given one rule by Swami Prabhupada. I couldn't initiate contact with anybody outside the monastery. I could return phone calls, and I could visit or talk if they came to see me, but I couldn't initiate this contact. With that one rule, of my 45 friends, 43 of them I've never seen again. With that one rule. You know, that just shows you how so many of our relationships in the world are a matter of marketing. You know, as long as you invite me to your party, I'll invite you to my party, that kind of thing. But move into a monastery and be the one that can't initiate, and boom, that's all it takes. You don't have to leave the world will leave you quite happily. And so, you know, this is part of part of that understanding. But mother, you know, mother walked with that immortal, unchanging absolute within, and she depended on that, and she found her strength in that, and it sustained her. So we're going to stop with Holy Mother stranded and alone in the middle of the Telo Belo field in danger of robbers.
Nice cliffhanger, Swami.
Yes. So just like they used to say on Batman, that show when I was a kid, be here tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. So we'll pick up with that next week. Let me turn off the recorder here.